Welcome back, viewers. We've been keeping a close track of the sales this festive season to see any indicators of a revival, return of consumer buying, or a revival in the consumer sentiment. And we did discuss a few days ago how numbers, especially in auto sales, are showing that yes, there has been some amount of buying that's taken place, not in all segments, but things are definitely looking better now than they were 4 months ago or even 6 months ago, or even before the lockdown. So joining me right now for a special conversation and for more insights into this, the Chairman of Maruti Suzuki, Mr. R.C. Bhargava. Mr. Bhargava, thank you so much for speaking with us here on Mirror Now. Mr. Bhargava, let's talk about the results that have just come out and what you're seeing on ground. Many are saying buyers are back in the market. What is your own sense? Is this simply a temporary blip, or can we be more hopeful?
There is no way of knowing how sustainable this buying will be after another couple of months. Because the festival season, the pent-up demand, the rural income factor, they all have been positive factors which have pushed the demand like this. But there are also negative factors which will come into play once this initial lot of buyers get exhausted, and particularly the urban buyers. So we are not quite certain as to whether overall demand, taking into account both the urban and rural demands, will sustain at a reasonably high level, whether it will fall to lower levels or whether growth will become quite low. It's something which we cannot forecast at the moment. I think at the we are able to say that till the end of December this year, demand will remain at this current high level. After December, the demand is uncertain, and we would make our estimate and what we expect to happen in January, February, only towards the latter part of December itself.
Okay, interesting that you say that, and I hear the sense of caution there, but would you say that, at least the worst times that we saw of the lockdown, we've recovered from that? Are we back to the pre-lockdown levels?
We are at the level of slightly higher actually than the level of last year. But last year was itself a depressed year because sale of cars in 1920 was 18% lower for the industry compared to 1819. So when you say back to pre-COVID levels, yes, we are back to 2021. But sorry, back to 1920. But 1920 itself is lower than 1819.
Okay. Mr. Bhargava, I wanted to ask you a larger question about how companies like yours have managed to tide through this year, the tough times that we had. Many others resorted to salary cuts, to massive layoffs, but Maruti has largely steered away from that. How did you manage to tide through these few months?
See, in 1920, certainly sales went down by 16%. But, and our profits correspondingly declined, but it was not as if we were making a loss or anything like that. We still made reasonable profits last year. We are a company who values our human resources. And we don't like to dispense with people's services only because sales have dropped a little bit, especially when we think that this is not going to be a permanent effect. So we did not dispense with the employees in that sense. Yes, to some extent where we had contract workers and their contract periods ended, their contracts are not renewed. That did happen to some extent. But overall, our employees continued and we had enough resources to look after them.
Okay, so let's talk about what can be done from the centre's side. The signals are that they may not be coming out with too much of a support for the auto industry. In fact, one of the ministers even was quoted saying that the auto industry needs to find its own solutions. Maybe lower the royalty payments that's been going on. What's your sense, Mr. Bhargava, as an industry leader? Should the auto companies look within to find solutions, or is there an expectation from the government?
No, I don't believe that government wants to leave the auto industry to itself. My view is, and I'm quite convinced of this view, that government recognizes the importance of the automobile industry for the entire economy, for the growth of manufacturing, for the growth of overall employment in the economy, for creating wealth in the country. So it's not an industry which I think government has washed its hands off at all. And I do expect that government will come to whatever decisions are required to ensure the steady and healthy growth of the industry. So I have a different view on this matter then.
So what would you hope or expect from the government?
Industry and government are talking to see how to have sustained demand in the economy. And obviously, the sustained demand requires that more and more people who are potential car buyers should be able to afford a car. Today, car buying, especially at the lower end, first-time buyers, are restricted by the ability to buy a car, to afford a car, even to make the down payment of the car. That is why the two-wheeler industry is such a large industry in India, selling 25 million or some two-wheelers every year, because people buy two-wheelers primarily because they cannot afford to buy a car. So their buyer's intention is there, but affordability is not there. And I think that affordability question is what has to be tackled. On the other hand, government's resources are limited. They have lots of demand for those resources. And it's not an easy problem to sort out as to how to increase the availability of cars for people, how to reduce the taxes on cars and automobiles so that more people can buy them, and yet manage to meet all the budgetary and other requirements. It's not an easy problem.
No, I agree with you that one thing that needs to be done, obviously, is to give more money in the hands of people to boost consumption, especially in the lower segment. But the other thing that you mentioned, Mr. Bhargava, maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought that you had said that a GST cut is not needed right now on cars. Is there a change in that thought?
No, I have only said that immediately it's not required because at this point the demand is high enough to offtake all the production which is possible. I'm saying that if you want to have long-term sustained demand at a reasonably high level, the car industry in the last 10, 12 years has grown only about 7.5% a year, which is much too slow for this country. And that if you want a higher sustained growth, it can only happen if the cost of buying a car for the customer, which means both the cost of production of the car, the GST, and the taxes which the states levy, all of them are combined to a level where much more customers can afford to buy the car on a sustained basis.
Okay. Well, then let's get to the other point. And you are right. The consumption in the lower end needs to be boosted. Right now, we are actually seeing, and reports have suggested that there is more demand in the higher category, higher end cars, but not so much in the others. Is that something that you've seen in your company's categories as well?
See, higher end people have the money. And, if somebody is buying a BMW or something, it doesn't really matter. But the real customers whom we should worry about and who are there in India waiting to buy a car, they run into millions. But how to make a product available for their pockets?
Okay, my last question to you, Mr. Bhargava. There's been a lot of this boycott China and Chinese products narrative that's been around for several months. Auto industry is also an industry, we'll have to look at it. Have you in the last few months or your company been able to explore other avenues and opportunities to reduce your dependency on Chinese parts?
No, we have not been heavily dependent on China anyway. But for the last many years, and this will go back at least to 6 or 7 or 8 years, we have been doing all our work in how to reduce import content, whether it is from China or Japan or Korea or anywhere else, or France or Germany, how to reduce import content, because imported materials create a lot of uncertainty in the long-term pricing and cost of production of a car because of rupee depreciation and such things, exchange rate fluctuations. So we want to localize as much as possible. Now we have made good progress, but there are still areas where either technology doesn't exist in India or the people who have the technology have excess capacities in other neighboring countries, and so they don't want to invest in a new plant. So there are difficulties in increasing localization faster. But this is a priority area for Maruti. We do want to keep reducing the import content. And this is import content not by Maruti. This is import content by the vendors who are producing the components which they supply to us. Maruti itself has a very low import content, some 4-5%.
All right, Mr. Bhargava, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on the show for your insights on what's going on in the auto industry, and there a word of, a cautious approach, to say the least, from R.C. Bhargava of Maruti Suzuki, saying we don't know this response that we are seeing during the festival season, how long it will last. Perhaps be able to take a call later this year of what's going to happen in the next few months. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhargava, for joining us.